who wants to be a part of their club anyway when they're a bunch of degenerates who abuse children? Exactly to your point about Disney Plus, it doesn't spit the kids out to something they shouldn't see. 2020 kind of changed things for me because
it shouldn't be shocking if I said that there are not many kid-friendly shows and movies that promote good values, let alone Christian values, in today's world. Even if you and me disagree on some things, we should at least agree on this one thing. For example, you put your child in front of Disney Plus and let them watch the Marvel's What If show, not concerned about what might pop up next, but then Disney puts Deadpool and Wolverine, a movie filled with foul language and foul content in it, and they put it on Disney Plus, and it's the next up after your kids' show. How can you trust them? And even though some shows might not be trying to make your kid trans, they don't contain the values that you want. But now, what if I told you that a certain man was working to change that? My guest on this episode of Creator Corner is Andrew Huff. Andrew Huff is a film writer, director, and producer dedicated to serving Jesus Christ by, quote, telling exciting stories with eternal truths. Andrew Huff, along with his wife, are the creators of the beloved Christian family-friendly show DotConner, Webtective. The show follows a girl, Dot, as she navigates life while also solving mysteries through a Christian worldview lens. Families absolutely love this show. But now, DotConner is no longer just a show, but has rather become something bigger. The show is not like other shows, which are just mindless, numbing entertainment, but the show rather pushes your child to think more critically about things through a Christian worldview. The show has been labeled, quote, edutainment, where it educates and entertains your child at the same time. Andrew Huff is joining me today on the podcast to discuss the making of DotConner, as well as the rewards and struggles they faced while making it, and Christian films in general. So please welcome Andrew Huff, a writer, director, producer, and creator of the beloved DotConner Webtective show, now becoming a feature film, to this episode of Creator Corner. Andrew Huff, thank you so much for joining me on Creator Corner.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with, I obviously want to get into the, DotConner and the making of DotConner, but why don't we start out with a bit of your background and maybe an intro, because you didn't just come out of nowhere and just, oh, let's make a feature film, and everyone's like, who is this guy?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of, to some degree, it kind of feels that way because I've actually only been really working on the entertainment side for the last 3 years with really no traction happening until the last couple of years. But yeah, you're right that I kind of didn't come out of nowhere, and it's been a interesting journey to get here. Kind of in a nutshell, I really was sort of headed into filmmaking even as a kid. I would make videos as a teenager with my brothers. Little spoof videos for our churches, all sorts of stuff, and was looking into actually becoming an animator. I really loved animation and how to use computers to do things, because when I was a teenager, it was kind of a new thing to use computers, and from a consumer perspective in creating video content, and so we were kind of fiddling around with how to do all that stuff. So I really kind of envisioned a future, working at a place like Pixar. But God had different plans for me. And instead of going that route, I actually ended up going into full-time ministry. And so worked for churches over the course of about 10 years, doing all sorts of stuff. Quite a bit of it in creative fields. So I was a part of larger churches that would do a lot of creative work, but I also did a stint as a middle school pastor, and that was really fun. But I think that was really, really good for me because going into ministry first and kind of, I went to seminary to get my master's degree. Doing those things really actually, looking back on it, helped me become a better storyteller, and prepped me for doing what I do now. Because what I came to learn is if I had kind of gotten into this when I was younger, I think I would have missed learning what life was all about, because ultimately what stories are about people. And what to tell a good story, you need to kind of understand people. And that sounds sort of obvious, but what I would add is that you kind of have to understand humanity's story against the backdrop of God's story, because that's where truth is. And I think that's what makes the best stories, or what makes the best stories so resonant and powerful, is the closer they get to what we call in our company, eternal truths. So if your story is exciting and entertaining, that's great. If it's far away from God's truth, it's not going to be a great story. So that really prepped me for that. But about a while ago, I guess going on 8 years maybe now, I felt God kind of pulling me away from pastoral ministry and sort of making this transition into media. I went and worked for a company at that point for about 5 years doing church media, where I got to do some filmmaking in a more unique way. But then ultimately after about 5 years, I mean, I really felt God calling me into doing entertainment media full time, and starting my own company alongside my wife, who's my producing partner. And really kind of as a quick background for us, and sort of what our business is now, and really what DotConner is also kind of all about, is I really felt that 2020 kind of changed things for me, because, and I know a lot of people will say that, for a variety of reasons. For me, I kind of felt the veil lifted a little bit for myself. Not that I didn't already think there was an insidious nature to like entertainment and kind of, especially anything coming out of Hollywood or the studio system. I don't believe anything was ever truly neutral. I definitely hold the view that, like, depending on what your personal worldview is as a filmmaker, that's going to influence the stories you make. But the veil, I feel like, was very lifted from, hey, we're going to kind of pretend to be morally good, to, no, now we're going to push immoral behavior as the norm in entertainment. And in particular, for my wife and I, because we have 4 children, we noticed it hugely in children's entertainment. And so that prompted us then to go, we got to do something about this, because we were kind of sitting around kind of tired that nobody was like making the kind of stuff we wanted to see. So that was what then led us to starting our own business 4 years ago, at the end of 2021, or 3.5, I guess, 3 years ago, and kind of going on this journey we're on now. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
No, that's definitely awesome, because I hear a lot of people nowadays will say, if you want to make it into filmmaking, like I've been told this directly, like if you want to make it into filmmaking, that you have to start like right now, and you have to just grind it out. And like, in a sense, yes, but then like you're a perfect example of, you're like, I didn't start, entertainment media really until just recently.
Yeah.
So,
and yeah, along those lines, let me just say real quick about that, because I know that there's you, but I bet a lot of people who even will watch this also might be in your position where they're maybe younger. I do think there's a start doing things now, because I definitely, like I told you, I was making videos when I was a teenager, right? But I think what you hear often is sort of the way that it used to. It was more of an old school approach of like, hey, go be a PA now on all these productions and everything, and learn everything you need to know. And we could talk about this a lot deeper, but I'm excited about kind of where things are at right now, because I don't know if you necessarily have to do things the old way to sort of create engaging and entertainment content now. And so it's kind of an exciting time as well, not just on that veil being lifted and going, okay, there's an opening to capture an audience that's really hungry for truthful content that's entertaining, that isn't insidious in nature, but then also like new ways to approach people new ways to get to the audience, new ways to create the content that's for the audience. It's technology is making things awesome. And so anyway, I'm super excited about the future of independent entertainment, and about guys like you who are jumping into it. And yeah, probably, a little raw.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that's where I kind of look at the industry as a whole. I think about the old days of the movie industry where people were we got this way some way because just somebody was figuring it out. It's probably a bunch of young guys just like goofing off or doing whatever. And so anyway, I'm super excited about your generation and what you guys are going to be able to accomplish, even greater to anything I'm doing right now. So
yeah. So, you've got other short films, but the main big thing is DotConner and the series. So when did you realize that, hey, this series, I want to make it into a feature film?
Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit of background on the series. I created the idea and the character when I was in pastoral ministry. I was doing creative work at a church, and the children's ministry there needed a Easter program kind of thing. And I invented the character and created a sort of the first version of it for an Easter program at the church I was at. Then kind of put it on a shelf for a while. And then in 2020, I started dabbling in entertainment with the company I was working with, and brought DotConner to them, and we started developing it as a series. And at the time, it took a little bit more of an edutainment shape to it than I really probably would have wanted. But that was kind of the focus of we were dabbling in sort of consumer facing entertainment, and also in what's called an OTT platforms. I'm blanking on what the OTT stands for, but it's essentially like a streaming video platform. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of dabbling in that, but like sort of looking at it as a pseudo entertainment, pseudo teaching kind of platform. And so we kind of started it there, but then ultimately that didn't really take off. And so the series came back to me to sort of finish development, and I started moving it more into sort of a true entertainment style, though I had to kind of maintain a little bit of that edutainment feel for the remainder of the series, just because we kind of established some things early on. So we ended up with 8 episodes of this original series that were kind of roughly 10 minutes in length. It's just a web streaming series for kids. Got it on a bunch of different streaming platforms. Most of them are smaller, niche Christian platforms for kids. But on every platform we were getting on, I mean, we were finding it was popular. And so we were really psyched about doing season 2. Now, here's the dirty little secret of streaming. And this is true on the Christian side, but it's kind of also true outside of the Christian streaming platforms. So this shouldn't sound like a criticism of just Christian streaming platforms, but there's essentially no money in it for creators in traditional streaming. It makes it very, very difficult to create high quality content because what you're doing is, especially on the kids side, about what you can do is about what you find, which is often like kind of a single performer in front of a green screen kind of content. And it's that way because there's no budget for anything more than that. But DotConner, we always approached as like a really high quality production, and wanted it to feel like a show that you might watch on Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, kind of back in the day, right? Because I feel like you don't get those kind of shows anymore. But so we were really trying to find a way to get season 2 off the ground. We had, story treatments done. We had season 2 first episode written, and there were a couple things that sort of there were several things that caused me to pivot. The first thing is, so when you're making Christian content, often what will happen, I'm pulling, this is going to be Secrets of the Christian Film Industry podcast is what this is going to be. When you're raising money for it, the pitch is very, very often not, hey, join us to make money on this project. The pitch is always, you're definitely going to lose money on the project. You're just donating it because of the ministry aspect of it. And me as a filmmaker, I don't really like that approach to it, only because, and maybe this is again the benefit of having been in ministry for a long time. I'm big on when you're giving money towards ministry that it's actually benefiting people. I'm not saying that entertainment can't benefit people. Well, more of what I mean is I like community involvement. I like you giving, I like people when people give to worthy causes or churches that are doing a lot to improve their local area, like literally help their neighbors, right? So when you're giving to a film, it's a little bit more like, is that actually helping people? I mean, kind of, but it's a little bit harder to quantify it, right? Like you can say there's like an evangelistic angle of this movie or this show. Someone might get saved from it, but I mean, and I'm sure there's ways to maybe find out if somebody emails you, but and we actually have heard about a salvation decision made through the DotConner show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
But just felt weird and kind of icky about being like, hey, give to this because it's a ministry. This is your tithe, I just kind of felt weird about that. So I didn't want to ask for that. So I wanted it to be a true business investment. So that kind of put streaming out. Then the other thing that happened was the strikes from last year. And here's what I started to see that I believe theaters are still a viable exhibition location for entertainment. I started to see that the strikes were causing delays on films that were in production, which meant there were going to be a lot of delays happening in theatrical release. And then you just go look at the calendar. Hollywood's kind of quit making family films. And there's family films still coming out, but all of them are like third, fourth, fifth in a series, And I think we're all kind of tired of sequels. So no original family content, really. And so we just put two and two together and thought, you know what? First, because of what was happening with the strikes, a lot more Christian films were getting consideration in theatrical release. Films that, 2-3 years ago would never made it. So we were like, okay, that's interesting. And then ultimately, I thought, I can't justify an investment in a project where I can't tell you what I'm going to make in streaming. But I can tell you how much a ticket costs to go to a theater, and I could tell you how many seats are going to be in that showing, and I could tell you how many of those seats I need to sell in that area in order to make X amount of dollars. And if I make X amount of dollars from this theater, I need to make X amount of dollars from these theaters, and now you got your money back. So it was literally a math problem.
Yeah.
And so we pivoted at that point to let's take what we were planning on doing for season 2, because it was already moving in a direction where it would be more of an entertaining story and a true mystery for our lead character to solve, and just turn it into a movie. And I thought, and then ultimately it came down to the script. I mean, I basically fall of last year was like, hey, let me see if I can take the plan for what we were going to do and write a script and see what happens. And if it turns out to be a script we like, then, that's what we'll do. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a lot. It seems like you've had a bit of a long journey along this. So production's already done, correct?
Yeah, so we shot the movie in July and August of this past summer. Yeah.
So what were maybe like some of your favorite moments on set of making this film that you're able to share in a way of hyping people up and saying it's not like some sets where you see, breakfast at this point, then shoot, and then you go to bed and then you do it all over again. It's like, hey, we're actually, having a good time here, and not like some of those other ones where it's like super duper strict and just all of this other stuff that goes on.
Yeah, totally. So this is what I was talking about earlier too, about how I feel so excited about where filmmaking is. So I'll share some moments with you initially in a minute, but let me lead into it by telling you that, and I'm not going to give you specific numbers on this, but I'm hopeful that our film is going to be a case study on how to do this in the future, for people like yourself, because all told, in terms of what our overall budget is going to be based on what the film ultimately is going to look like and be like, I think people are going to be shocked. And I say that only because we leveraged technology and we leveraged, and by the way, hear me out when I'm saying technology, I'm not even necessarily saying AI. Okay. I'm just saying technology in general, and the advancements in camera, advancements in sound, advancements in what you can use computers for, advancements in scheduling software, all that kind of stuff. We leveraged all of it to basically be able to produce. And now there's going to be places where the budget, you kind of feel the low budget nature of it for sure. But when I say people are going to be shocked, I think there's going to be this overall like, and that's pretty good. It feels like a Hollywood movie. And the reason that it feels that way is because we did the work in advance of being on set. So I'm going to tell you some fun moments from the set, but I want you to know that the reason the set was fun was because of all the work we did before we ever even got on set. And that's the secret. The secret to filmmaking that Hollywood doesn't tell anybody and nobody writes books about. And that is, the secret to making a good film is doing all the work before you ever shoot. And being willing to do all the work. Because I think that's what sometimes happens is people think, well, if we just show up on set, then everything will kind of fall into place.
Nope.
But no, you have to make it, you have to ensure that it's going to be in place before you ever get there. And that goes all the way to me, as a director, being prepared to, when I walk on that set, knowing exactly what we're going to shoot, every single shot. Not only knowing exactly what we're going to shoot in terms of every single shot, but knowing exactly how things are supposed to go in that scene for the day, and how that scene is going to play into all the other scenes, right? So you have to know the story. You have to know the story in advance. You have to know the shots in advance. You have to know the schedule in advance. You have to know who's there in advance. You have to know the actors in advance. It's all in advance. And that's what really made those days fun, because then what happens, when you're on set, the goal should be not that, okay, we got everybody here, now what are we doing? That's not it. The goal when you step on the set is, okay, everybody's here, here's our plan, what's not gonna work? Because there's just some things you can't account for. And so what then you do is you figure out how to cover for those things you can't make work. But then ultimately, if whatever you can out of your plan, do it. Just have that vision, have that plan, and do it. And so we were able to shoot the movie over the course of 18 days, and we scheduled 10 hours each day. And that's 10 hours for anybody who's new to this. That's 10 hours from when you arrive to when you actually are in your car and you see the taillights leaving, right? So that's not 10 hours from shooting to finishing shooting, because there's tear down and clean up and all that stuff that has to happen too. So 10 hours a day for 18 days, and we never went overtime. Not a single day went overtime. And we were able to do that because we leveraged things like, yes, there was a little bit of AI involved in terms of I think AI is great for sort of those initial ideas, like, hey, here's the people I have, how much, how much food do I need, or how much, what's the cost, blah, blah, blah. Budgeting is great to use AI for. Can kind of get some base numbers at that point. But we leveraged things like being able to utilize online tools to create spreadsheets. And I use Google Sheets. I'm a creative guy. I figured out how to use Google Sheets to basically create a shot list that had all the information for the DP and the G&E team and the camera crew, along with example frames from other movies. So like, here's the shot and here's what I want it to look like. And a great resource for that is a website called Shot Deck. And there's several others out there. But this is what I'm talking about in terms of technology. There's people out there. ShopDeck has like thousands upon thousands of screenshots from movies, frames of shots, and searchable by like things in terms of filmmaking, like, oh, I want a 2-shot that's, a wide angle, or something like that. So you can find what you're looking for. And then anything I didn't have on that, I'd do simple sketches for it, everything. But we did that. We leveraged new camera technology. So some of the fun things that happened on set is we leveraged the DJI Ronin 4D for this movie. If you've heard of that, it's basically a camera system that has the gimbal built into the camera system. And so, but you can take the head of the camera that has the lens on it off the camera body and stick it on the end of a boom pole, which gives you top-down shots almost instantaneously, right? And there's a little bit of learning curve, and my camera team was great, very professional camera team that got up to speed on it super fast. And we were able to use that camera in really awesome ways that we couldn't have if you're waiting to like set up a dolly system for instance, because that can just be so cumbersome and intrusive. So it allowed us to really get in, which then allowed, my camera team to be able to do that and get those shots and sort of move quickly, really allowed our actors and me as director to kind of play with the scenes, right? So some of my favorite moments were we're on time and we can run a take and we can kind of let the actors kind of do some fun stuff, or come up with new jokes. Cause that's one of the things that we really wanted is for this film to be funny. And so that was really fun to do. And then, probably the highlight, honestly, and this is kind of a quick thing to get people hyped up and then we can move on. But, so again, low budget, but because we're not shooting in California, everything we shot in Middle Tennessee, in Nashville, everything's way cheaper. We got to shut down a street in the middle of downtown Nashville on a day to shoot a chase scene. And we did it at our budget level. It was actually an incredibly low, you wouldn't believe how low budget it was, but it was that way because we took our time to plan for it and to contact everybody we needed to and to jump through all the hoops and do everything we had to do to get it to get it set up that way. And so it was awesome. It was such a cool, I can't even, the fact that your team shut the street down and you just get to kind of film around the street in the downtown of a major city. It was really cool. It was fun. Everybody had a blast that day, right? So, and we had a stunt team that was there doing a stunt for it and stuff like that. So it was just a blast. It was a great time.
That's so cool. So, you're working with younger people and kids. Did you face any of the, restraints because there's just so many like laws and regulations about child actors now and like how long they can be on set, how long they can be on camera. Did you ever, face any of that? And was it easy to resolve or like super, people just hating on you and be like, no, you can't do this, can't do that, can't do that. Yeah.
Right. So, believe it or not, there actually there are child labor laws for sure, but there's two different, ways to look at the restrictions. One is the true legal sense of, you're not allowed to work a child. And fortunately for us, you'd actually kind of be surprised how many people actually were under the age of 18. So that was one thing that kind of helped us tremendously is we weren't actually working with a lot of kids. In fact, one of our lead actors, is a lot older than she looks. And so
yeah,
that helps.
Mm-hmm.
But there's that, which we never really even came close to breaking any kind of the laws there. And especially with underage talent, we never work with underage talent without a guardian, parent or guardian on set as well. So they are really the parent guardian for us is the keeper of that child's sort of work schedule and helping us stay like on track. And we worked with some great talent and great families and stuff like that. So it was awesome. But I think when everybody thinks of child labor laws, what they're actually thinking about are the restrictions that the entertainment unions put on productions. Because this is another little sticking point for independent productions, is whether to go union or non-union. If you go union, it creates a lot of difficulty when it comes to the restrictions that the union puts on you, and increases your costs substantially. And so we chose to go truly independent on this film, which allowed us to save money, and then also allowed us not to sort of be beholden to some restrictions that I would actually argue might be a little less, or might be too restrictive, ultimately. Now, that being the case, it is incumbent upon filmmakers to treat their cast and crew well, because we've all heard horror stories. You can kind of understand the idea behind a union when you hear horror stories of productions going 16 hours and not feeding their crew or whatever, right? There's a lot of taking advantage of abuse that happens. But I think, to me, I see that as a challenge to be even better than it might be if the unions were even there, right? In terms of not going overtime and not pushing my crew too hard, and being cognizant of my talent. So we're not even, at that point, we're not even necessarily talking about underage, even just in general, not making sure that like any talent or any crew aren't abused too much. So that's on the film. I will say on the series, when our talent was much younger, there was, we had to schedule break time in, because we could only really work with them for a certain amount of time, give them a break, and then work with them again. Which again, it's kind of funny that we have those in place. And again, child labor laws are totally fine. Like, we all know the history there and the importance of it. But sometimes I couldn't keep them offset.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like saying, no, you get 2 hours of a break. And they're like, no, I'm fine. I want to do it, because then they get to leave earlier if it's done. So it's really fun to kind of work with people who are passionate, but also have the same goals in mind as you, which is really the health and well-being of the cast and crew comes first. And then everything else comes second. But again, that becomes super easy if you do everything in advance.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. So, did you start pitching the idea for the film and start raising, like, use the series as essentially a pitch for the film, and that's where you raised the money for the budget for the film?
Great question. Because it's kind of an interesting answer, because you would imagine, I would bet that anybody who watches this or is thinking about filmmaking or is even doing it and prepping something to pitch would imagine that if you had something like we did, where you had what ultimately amounted to 80 to 90 minutes of content already done, right? That points to the quality, that points to, we know what we're doing. We've won awards for DotConner, from smaller Christian film festival type things, but some of the larger ones, and so surprisingly, we were being met with a lot of hesitancy when it came to the movie, and it was very, very difficult to pitch to people currently in the industry, and studios and production houses and all sorts of stuff to do this movie. Because we initially weren't going to raise the funds ourselves. We were like, well, let's find a partner that's interested in good content and maybe is looking for their next thing to develop. I think the economy kind of played into that a little bit, to be honest with you, where I think a lot of people were just kind of hesitant to really give or really commit to anything, to wait and see kind of how this last year turned out from an economic perspective. I think the other side of it too is, and again, inside secrets of the Christian movie industry, I think for a lot of what you would consider to be Christian movie studios or Christian production studios, they kind of are all really just working on their own thing. And there's not this collaborative nature to it, meaning they kind of have their people, they're kind of working on their thing, they're kind of trying to move their pieces forward on their movies. But there's no collective, it's not like a studio, a Hollywood studio where, they might be looking for production partnerships and stuff like that. And so we were kind of surprised by that. Really then coming around to the conclusion that if we were going to do this, we were going to have to do it ourselves. We're going to have to raise the money ourselves. We were going to have to produce it ourselves. And I always kind of thought, if I can just film it, then I know that on the back end, I'm going to find a place for it and people are going to respond well to it. And so we just kind of, we had some personal investment we could put towards it. We had some private investment that came in. We did a crowdfunding campaign, which is actually still going. We're finishing funds, and we'll need marketing budget. But we feel like, again, once people start seeing it, because we're going to start doing test screenings and stuff like that, that'll kind of come naturally. But, and then some tax deductible donation type stuff. So we kind of just brought as much together. And in order to do that, by the way, we had to know what we expected to spend to actually shoot it. And so you're talking about already having the budget figured out, as once we start the raise, because it's like, well, here's where we got to go. Here's where we got to get to. And we essentially, this has kind of been a fun journey because we feel like God's really only giving us exactly what we need in the moment. Like nobody's coming in like to save the day. It's just some giant check. And so we just are doing it sort of by ourselves, and have gotten it all the way to, we have a cut that's pretty far along, that we're going to be doing some test screenings with and stuff like that. But we were able to shoot it. And I think ultimately, here's what was cool about that. And this is maybe something that people watching this who want to do this kind of thing, this is what I really think is true. And I think hopefully this is what more and more independent filmmakers start to realize is what was kind of cool about that is then ultimately I made the movie I wanted to make. If I had went with another place that provided me the production budget to be able to do it, then what was likely going to come with that was changes that production house wanted, or that producer, who brought the money in wanted. And not to say that could have been beneficial to the movie or not. I mean, like, who knows, it could have maybe benefited the movie ultimately, but it also could have harmed the movie ultimately. And so at the end of the day, I got to make the movie I wanted to make. And so, that's what I think is how I would encourage future filmmakers is don't wait for somebody to come in with a check, for you to go make, your movie. You've got to figure out how to do it on your own if this is what you want to do. And what's cool is you can get equipment to help you do that relatively cheap. I think start out with like short films and shorter content, because making a feature is obviously like, it's a lot harder to do with volunteers or anything like that. Yeah. But if you and your friends are shooting videos like for a day, or shooting a short for a day or something, or doing like a film competition where you can do, you do a short in like 48 hours, or something. And then you submit that and you get awards for it and stuff. That helps you grow. But it's like doing those things are cool, like getting awards are cool, and going to the conferences are cool and film festivals, and that's fine. It's just not, if you want it, you got to kind of go make it for yourself, because I think done are the days of sort of I wrote this screenplay and it hit the blacklist and now I got paid $2 million, for my screenplay.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's happening anymore. I think more often than not, and that to me is exciting, because it means we kind of get to create independent stories that aren't going to be forced into this corporate field that I think a lot of Hollywood feels like right now, where everything's just like every movie, and you probably feel this too. is almost like the marketing team wrote it. It is basically how it's done now, right? It's like, how can it be marketed to the most people? It's not necessarily like, hey, is it just any good? So
Yeah, no, I jumping a little bit back to something you said earlier, and you mentioned it here, is, young filmmakers and things like that. So, for example, when I shot my first short film, I completely funded it. It was like $400 to $500, and decided to rent like this big cinema camera, and which was a mistake, but I had to learn that the hard way. And but like going into it, I learned so many things. Like I had planned, how things were gonna go, but things didn't go exactly as that. And I was like, oh wait, but this shot would look good, that shot would look good. And instead of being there from like 5 to 10 p.m., I was like there from 5 to 1 a.m. in the morning.
yeah.
So when you got started with, filmmaking, what are some of the lessons, the big lessons that you have learned, that you can share with other audiences?
Yeah, that's awesome. And hey, by the way, hear me when I say I've had those days too. I've 100% made those exact same mistakes. Speaking of working with child talent, I was working on a production that was independent but volunteer based. It was for a church, and we went overtime late into the night with child actors, which became a problem for sure. That only happened once, and I made sure that would never happen again. So, but some of the probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, and maybe it's two. I think they're connected. So the first one is that there are awesome filmmakers who you can learn from. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that seems obvious, but what I mean is people, I think people rely too much on trying to find a book or an article or a video that tells them what to do, right? And how to do things, or what, for instance, constitutes a good shot or a good way to do a scene. I think of movies, and I think of shows, and I think of directors, more so than I go to like a book or go to a video. I think those things are really, really great for the technical side of doing this, meaning like you can learn a lot. Like take screenwriting as for instance. Here's a screenwriting tip. A lot of people will tell you how a screenplay is supposed to be written. A lot of people will tell you how a screenplay is supposed to be structured. There's books on it. And what I found that's more helpful than the books that tell me how to write a screenplay, or the maybe producers that tell you how a screenplay should be written, is reading the screenplays of classic movies that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And if I go and look at those screenplays and all of a sudden those screenplays break all the supposed rules that there are, that starts to call into question maybe some of the rules that people tell you are out there. So I learn from the people who've been there before, and I learn from the people who, that's a huge skill to have. If you can learn from others, it's a massive skill to have. And so listening to interviews from filmmakers, doing a masterclass a filmmaker might do, but I'm talking about like Ron Howard's one of my favorite filmmakers, and I watched his masterclass and it was awesome, right? So that's one tip, one thing I learned. And that was, I didn't even really think about that because I think it was just something that came naturally. I was homeschooled all the way through, from kindergarten to 12th grade. And I think I just sort of naturally had to learn it myself kind of attitude. So I just did it that way. But kind of in conjunction with that, you have a lot to learn. You have the things you need to learn, you can learn from other filmmakers who've been there before. The other thing that I've learned is, okay, if I hear things that resonate, as I start to develop my style, I have to trust myself as well. So a little something to what you said about, it's very easy to kind of come in with the plan and then get on set and start thinking about other ways to do things, right? Like, oh, well, what if this shot, or what if we did this over here? We do that when it comes to, I can't get the shot that I planned, right? But what I've learned is I trust my vision I had before I got on set. And I go, if that's all the time we have, that's what we're getting. And I don't deviate. Now, where I have to deviate is where maybe my original plan doesn't work for whatever reason. Lighting can determine a ton of that, because you want to have good lighting too. So it's this collaborative. I like having a director of photography, so I'm not the director of photography, and it's a collaboration between the two of us, because I know he's going to make it look gorgeous, and then however he makes it look the best, does it fit? Does it work still? What I was planning on doing.
Yeah.
And then two, he's also listening to me and going, well, here's what he wanted. Can I give him that look, and not fundamentally change what he was trying to do? So it's this collaboration between us, but we get what I want, that I wanted when I walk in. Now, where we end up changing is where he might go, we get what I wanted and we guys still have time, and he'll go, hey, what about this? Because he's thought of something, right? Or if I thought of something, we have time. But it's always if we have time. And then that rarely happens that we have time. What's happening more often than that is I've got my shot list open and I'm crossing out shots that I was going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the tip that I've learned is let go of a shot, because if you can cover it using a shot you used before, or you kind of have to be thinking about it the whole time in terms of the scene and what you need, and with your eye on that clock. Now, we also had a first assistant director who that's the role that really keeps an eye on the clock to try to keep the director from having to focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, on an independent production, I mean, I'm going to have my eye on the clock, right? Because ultimately it's me. I'm the one who's going to determine if we are done on time or not. And I'm going to determine that if I get everything I want and everything that's necessary for the scene. But that the skill is basically trusting yourself, trusting your original gut instinct, and just doing that. And then knowing where you can kind of bend on that, where you can go, okay, I'll cut that out. He came up with a great way to do both of those. Let's do that. Trusting other people around you, because maybe it's not you who comes up with the way to do it. But then ultimately, if you're short on time, you just go, here's what we're going to get this, this, and this, and we're done, and being willing to move on.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. So obviously DotConner is a Christian family friendly, piece of content. And, you mentioned it earlier, but Hollywood doesn't seem to cater to Christian and family content anymore. Like, Disney went all woke, and even like when the new like Deadpool movie came out, they put it on Disney Plus and stuff, along with all these other kids shows. And I'm like, so essentially you stick your 3-year-old in front of the screen, and after that show, the next up could be, Deadpool. Yeah. I'm like, I'm fine if you put it on Disney Plus, but have some sort of like, okay, 18 years or older page, and then you have a specific passcode for it, so your kid can't just like run into that.
Right.
So what have you found are some of the challenges, making Christian family content in today's world?
Yeah, it's a great question. The challenge is definitely, so it really is kind of the way that the system is set up now. It's sort of working I think I've heard other people say this. You might have heard other people say this too. It almost feels now to be Christian and like morally sound, and like it feels very countercultural, like rebellious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to make a Christian family film that's like entertaining and fun and like adventurous feels countercultural in a weird way. because you would think that that's a knock out of the park. You make a mystery adventure for families that has Christian elements in it, and you're just like, how does that not make hundreds of millions of dollars? I mean, that just feels right, you know? But like I said, we were met with a lot of like shrugs in terms of doing it. And I think the challenge is, while the audience is hungry for that kind of stuff, there's no place to that will provide it. Everybody's very like hesitant to do it. And I think it stems from, again, I feel like Hollywood's kind of basically gone that way. This is a little bit hyperbolic, but you know, your Disney Plus example. I mean, I kind of imagine the Disney executives hoping that a 3-year-old watches Deadpool Wolverine.
Yeah,
You know, because that'll sink their evil clutches into the child even more, you know, or whatever. And then and for my wife and I, when we started looking at wanting this kind of content, you know, the biggest question mark I think is the source of the entertainment, because I don't think anybody's figured it out. Now, I think you know the guys at lore.tv, and I think they're onto it. They're experiencing the same thing we are, in the sense of what they're doing feels very countercultural and rebellious to the current sort of nature of the industry from both sides, Christian and non-Christian. And so they likely are gonna, they could be the first ones, you know, to get there in terms of becoming that place where, okay, the type of content the audience is looking for is available here, and the audience now knows about it, and they're all flocking there, right? And so I think the biggest challenge that we had was like basically not having any support, or feeling like we're not having any support from a lot of people in the industry. I shouldn't say none, because there's definitely people in the industry who have supported us. But one of the other challenges that we've had is, even from our own sort of thinking about it, is there's that question of how much do you balance Christian themes and elements with, because nobody wants to be accused of being preachy, right? And so how do you tell a good story that has Christian themes and elements in it, and not be preachy? Well, first, I kind of, let me just say this real quick. I'm going to jump on a soapbox, and I promise I won't be on it very long. It's pretty rich hearing about like being preachy from the current industry, where every Hollywood movie is stuffed to the gills with liberal preachiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's clip after clip after clip.
Yeah. They're like, don't be preachy, but we can be preachy with our own ideology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like,
sounds
that's
good.
Pretty rich coming from you.
Yeah.
So I actually don't even, I'm like, being accused of being preachy doesn't bother me at all. But I do get the sense of what feeling a lot of Christians have, which is Christian movies can feel too cheesy in the Christian themes that come in them. And so the challenge has been, how does it have Christian themes, and how, like, here's the funny thing. And again, you know, I can probably say I think our movie did it and it's going to be groundbreaking and all that kind of stuff. But it's my movie. I mean, the audience isn't going to have to tell me one way or the other.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell me when you see it.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the things that I kind of makes me laugh is I feel like there's a lot of Christian elements in it, and then people will watch it and go, yeah, I didn't think there was that much in it. And I'm like, I mean, we quote scripture and we drop the name of Christ, and what's happening, you know? But I really think the challenge that we had, that we really thought about and approached, and why this hopefully is the case, when people watch it, they don't feel like it's preachy, and yet it's very deep in its theology, is that the Christianity, we approached the Christian themes from a character standpoint, meaning these characters they're Christian characters in it, and where it made sense for the Christian characters to be Christian, they are Christian. And then when it made sense for them, where it didn't make sense for them to be Christian, they're not. Meaning, and they are, what I mean by that is them using dialogue to communicate Christian ideas, right? At points, it's just they're people. And then they just, not everything has to be an opportunity to share some kind of teaching point. And so sometimes it can just be fun, and I personally think Christianity is fun and the Bible's fun, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was a challenge.
Yeah, no, because you mentioned earlier of how like they're like, oh, there wasn't much in it, and you're like, oh, we dropped the name of Christ and quoted scripture and everything, and I feel like that in a way, people don't think there's anything in it because Christianity has in a way become sort of a fad today. All these people, all these big influencers, like Jordan Peterson is like, oh, I'm a Christian, and Candace Owens is like, oh, I'm a Christian, and it's like, are you really? Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. And even like I was discussing this with Marcus Pittman, and there's like the two ditches on either side of, the Christian entertainment, where it's like, either way, we can't escape the truth. So either way, it's going to be a gospel story. And so there's those people where it's like, oh, so if it's just going to be a gospel story because, we can't escape the truth and all that, then I'm just going to go, make whatever and not worry about any of that stuff and just make whatever comes to my heart and stuff. And then there's the other ones where it's like, I have to, get this message across. And so they're doing it, and they're the ones that are, called too preachy, where it's like, this is just, cheesy at the moment. And it's like, they're like, why didn't it perform well? It's like, well, like your lines are really, really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and maybe another screenwriting tip for anybody who's looking to do this. I'm really, really passionate about, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, but man, when the dialogue doesn't sound natural, like in a conversation, like that'll kill, I think, personally, that'll kill any movie immediately. Like the dialogue has to sound natural, meaning even just, and there's definitely character where it's like, well, that character is going to say this and it's funny because it's the wrong time to say it, or whatever. So there's definitely character stuff that can drive dialogue. But man, if it's just two people having a conversation and one person's like, just says something out. The worst is when you're trying to give exposition about characters through dialogue, and the character, it's like two people who are related to one another or friends talking about an event or something that they both went through, and they repeat all the details of the event or the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you saying that to someone who should already know what happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's got to sound natural.
Yeah, because you can definitely tell when watching movies, you're like, that's not natural at all. They're just reading off script. And everyone says, don't use contractions, in writing. And it's like, well, that's the way people, like, don't write the way people speak. And it's like, yes, when you're writing a paper, don't write the way people speak. But when you're writing dialogue, and even if, these two actors are conversing or whatever it is, just give them the idea and what I want to get out of this conversation, and then just let them flow with it. Because if you say, hi, Jane, well, how's your day going? It's like, just let them flow with it, because then it'll come more natural to them.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if you're trying to do too much in the dialogue, and there's the exposition side of it where you're trying to introduce characters and they're telling you everything about themselves, that's one thing. But on the Christian side of it, to communicate your message via a person just being like, well, this reminds me of the Bible and this and blah, 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 blah. And then they just spill it out in this area where it doesn't make it doesn't make sense in the context.
Yeah.
That's where I think the true idea, and it's not just Christian, that's what happens. That happens in Hollywood stuff all the time, where liberal talking points will just come out of nowhere. It's like, that's what the preachiness is. It's not necessarily being preachy. There's tons of films that are preachy, but you don't know they're preachy because they presented a story to you with characters who felt real and dialogue that was natural, that then like gave you a certain worldview and a certain point of view. And so those are my favorites, right? Is like a film that's actually preachy and you had no idea it was preachy because you were just captivated, by the performances or by the visuals or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So when do y'all have an official release date for DotConner yet?
We don't have an official release date. What I will say is, in the nature of independent filmmaking, we have to be pretty far along before we can introduce the film to theaters. It becomes a little bit, for independent movie, for a Hollywood feature, they can kind of go to a theater and say, we're going to make a Christmas movie with The Rock, and the theaters are going to be like, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Fine by us.
When you want to put it out. For independent films, it's like we gotta have a pretty polished product before we bring it to them, in order to really secure a prime like release date. I will say again, it feels like we could pick any weekend we wanted because there's so few family films coming out, that even our original release date idea was we wanted to pitch DotConner against Snow White, that's coming out in March.
Yeah.
Because we thought that would be a really good, I think everybody knows what they're going to get with Snow White. Snow White's dead before it's even arrived. And so I thought it would be a great marketing angle to go, hey, you already know what you're going to get with Snow White. You weren't going anyway, but go to the movies that weekend and support a Christian film, just to really stick it to them,
Yeah.
We need a little bit more time to get to a theatrical presentation version of the movie, which is probably works in our favor, to be honest, because March is a little bit of a iffy time for a family film because summer is obviously highlight. And our film, one of the storylines in our film is that our lead character, Dot, is starting her first week of high school. So we actually think it'll play better to get closer to the end of summer, because a lot of people will have start of school on their minds. And so we think the storyline will play better then anyway. So that's kind of, I would say if we were trying to target something to be late July, August timeframe, theaters are going to determine that. We'll probably, because we're an independent film, what'll happen is, what'll most likely happen is we'll get a limited release for like a weekend or a week, in the select number of theaters, which you're hoping will be high. And then if the movie plays well, it will continue on. It will get more screens at that point. And so that's typically how independent releases work. And so once we nail that down with the distribution, a partnership that we create, we will, we'll try to drive a ton of business towards that opening weekend just to get people to, and again, I think the movie will speak for itself. I think when people see what we've done, and it's fun and it's funny, it's got surprises in it. And so, and like I said, it's something that it really isn't out there, anywhere from anybody. So it'll be just so unique. I think that'll sort of drive some of the interest by itself.
Yeah. So are you independently producing it, or are you partnering up with, because I know there's companies like I think it's Solideo Gloria, producing that'll help get films into that, or are you like, we've already gone independent here, let's take it the whole way, and in a way kind of create a statement that, hey, if you want to do this independent, it's hard, but it's possible.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to that. Our first and foremost approach is finding partner. So SVG is a great example. We've had conversations with them. They love the property. So that could be a possibility. We have a connection to Fathom Events, which is now Fathom Entertainment, which has really become successful through quite a bit of Christian independent releases. And they work with all three of the major chains, theater chains here in the United States. And then there's a handful of others that we definitely have had conversations with and would consider. And then ultimately, you're right. I mean, there's a version of this where we just do it ourselves.
Yeah,
we've done that up to this point. So
yeah.
But I walk into the office of whatever theater chain and plop the movie down on the desk. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. But we'll kind of see what direction makes the most sense. Again, I'm trying to look at it from I want this to do several things. First and foremost, now this is kind of the biggest hope is that we finally give a large audience something they've wanted. trustworthy entertainment for kids, for families that want that kind of thing. So that's what I first and foremost hope happens, is that all of those families find it and it meets exactly what they've been looking for. I hope too that what this movie does, and it could be, even if we still work with a distribution company or if we ended up going all the way ourselves, is promoting the idea to current and new filmmakers, independent Christian filmmakers, that the industry is being remade, and the what has been true for so long, or things that they have been told has been true for so long, a lot of it actually isn't applicable anymore, and that some of what's been done has been created to sort of gatekeep new people from even getting into it. And so I'm kind of hoping that we can be a part of that. I don't know if it'd be, pretty arrogant to say that our film is going to be the one that does it, but I think it's our film along with others that are going to basically say, hey, it shouldn't cost you millions upon millions of dollars to make a good movie, because technology should be bringing the cost of movies down. Good movies, because ultimately a good movie is because of a good story, but the way that you capture it should be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because of technology. It shouldn't be taking millions upon millions of dollars to have a truckload of equipment just sitting off to the side. But you're being told you have to have that, right? Because that's what all the big boys do.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that we can be a part of that of changing that conversation from, well, you can't get the money to make the kind of movie, the kind of adventure movies that we want from Hollywood, so don't even try, to, no, you actually can do it, and everybody should do it, and we should stop waiting around for them to for them to open the door to their club. And here will be here's the pull quote for you to get people to watch this. Who wants to be a part of their club anyway, when they're a bunch of degenerates who abuse children? So
yeah,
I don't need their awards.
There's the
I don't
intro.
need their late night shows. I don't need, I just don't want it. I want to make my own thing. I love having a conversation with Elijah and encouraging Elijah to carve a new path as well in terms of his filmmaking or whatever he seeks to do. I prefer that than getting the invitation to go on some late night show to talk to some guy that, I should probably be careful about what I accuse late night show hosts of doing.
Stephen Colbert is just, Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon are just boring in general now. So who would want to go on there?
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. So once DotConner goes into theaters after that theatrical run, you mentioned earlier how streaming, there's not much money in there for you. So what's the hope after that? Is there the hope to put it on streaming services or do like DVDs? Because I know with some streaming services, there's regulations where, hey, you can't put it on DVD because you're streaming it here, and there's, in a way, like rights to it. So what's the hope after the theatrical run?
Yeah, so we will put it on streaming. We absolutely want to get it out there. Where we do that, we're not having a conversation about where we do that and what that should look like, because for me, the goal has always been to make it a true business investment that I can try to turn a profit around on for my investors, and for us personally, so we can continue doing this. If it's successful in theaters, I imagine we'll get a good deal for streaming. If it goes gangbusters and it's a hit, for all intents and purposes, then I would assume streaming platforms would then come asking for it, and we would consider those. The sort of secretly, I think it would be fun for one of the larger platforms, like a Netflix tier, to come for the movie, and I sort of take whatever money they want to offer, but my counter is they have to take the original series as well.
Yeah.
Because I just have this secret sort of plot to get the original series on like a Netflix, because the original series is more edutainment, meaning it teaches pretty deep, pretty deep Christian doctrine. And so the idea of like a family engaging with the movie and then the kids going to find the series, the gospel is heavily presented in the series. And so that just kind of, it's a little insidious plot from me to get the gospel preached on Netflix, and so
I don't know if Netflix would pick it up, but
right.
Yeah.
I'd imagine if the movie is successful enough, they may let the dollar signs sway them. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I guess that's one thing
I should
to
probably
find
also
out.
say that real quick, the series also is streaming internationally. So even prior to streaming and even prior to, you say, DVDs or something like that, we have a big interest in potentially even investigating theatrical release internationally. Series is playing down in South America. It's been dubbed into Spanish. It's playing in South Korea. It's playing in Australia. So we have some ideas in terms of theatrical, international theatrical release that could be kind of exciting. And then ultimately streaming and dubbing the movie and stuff like that, I think is totally on the table for international audiences too, to engage with the movie. So
so I know you've talked a bit about, for young creators, don't wait for a check and just go make what you can make, and then also planning ahead and planning as much as you're able to of how this will go and how that will go. But if you were to give one piece of advice to young creators who are wanting to do this, what would you say to them?
I'm going to give you two, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One probably is going to sound more personal and the other's more professional. Because my very, very first piece of advice, and I'm coming at this from a Christian perspective, is grow your relationship with Jesus Christ. That is foundational. And it is foundational from, I mentioned right up at the top that the reason I think I'm a good storyteller is because I've studied scripture, engaged with people through ministry. You don't have to go into Christian ministry like I did, but what that allowed me to do was engage with people in spiritual conversation, whether it through small groups or whether it through counseling or whatever. But I was engaged in the local church. I was reading scripture. I was praying. I was learning, doing my best to learn what the Christian life was all about, which ultimately, I think if I could boil it down, is seeking Christ every single day, seeking to get to know him, and then seeking to mirror him to others in your own life every single day. And what that's going to do is that's going to make you a better storyteller. And then that's ultimately going to make you better at whatever your job is in filmmaking, because the more I've become like Christ, the more that I will put others first, which means treating my cast and crew better, the more I will understand people. So if I have a cast or crew member that's going through something personally, that allows me to engage with them at that level and help them through that, or whatever. So that feels personal, but I think that just is so foundational to professional that has to be like the very, very first tip. But then professional on the other side is God gifts people uniquely. And so you don't have to the first thing that probably anybody needs to know is you don't have to be a writer director to be a filmmaker. I think that's what sometimes a lot of younger people think. Well, I have to write it and then I have to direct it. Well, no, there's a lot of jobs in filmmaking that you might not be gifted in that way. You might even not be gifted in writing. You might not be gifted in directing. But you might be gifted in another way. There's so many roles. Get to know all the roles in filmmaking, because there might be a role that you're gifted for and you just go, man, for whatever reason, I'm just really good at this and I could do this all day. And it's like, well, then just do that. Because then you're still working in film. Like, you don't have to be, I think there's an allure to being the person that wrote it, or an allure to being the person that directed it, or allure to being the actor. And I want younger people to know that, that every person is valuable on that set, and it is not a tier. There's the whole above the line, below the line thing. I'm sure you've heard that. And if younger filmmakers don't know, above the line is like your talent. Like we say, those are the talent. It's like lead cast. It's the director, it's the writer, it's the producers. Those are all above the line, and everybody else is below the line. You got to drive yourself to set if you're below the line. And I hate that terminology, because it's like, no, I mean, PAs are incredibly valuable on set and shouldn't be treated any differently, meaning as people. Now, they don't get to walk in on set and like tell me how to direct. So you got to know your place, just like any other business or team. But at the same time, you could find a role where you're doing like this particular thing, and that is the thing that like you're really good at, and you can be successful doing that, and you don't have to use that as a step. There's this whole thing, and I think it's just Western civilization has created this whole like climb the ladder idea. You don't have to. Like, if you love making movies, and the part about making the movie that you love is set design, and you just love, like you just think in terms of that, and you love it, and you're really good at thrift shopping, or whatever. Do that. You don't have to write or direct in order to be a filmmaker, because the set decorator is as much a filmmaker as anybody else. The set doesn't look, great without a set decorator. We didn't have a specific set decorator on DotConner. I mean, it was kind of a collaboration between like our production designer and then myself and some of the producers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a collaborative effort to like decorate the set. And so I sets. And so it all turned out great. Would have been awesome to have somebody who just loved doing that and had an eye for that, and like could sort of go in and make a set look lived in, because that's sometimes what happens, is like it doesn't feel lived in, or whatever. That's a great skill to have, and you can do that. And I think that's what the studio system used to be really good at, that independents sometimes forget or aren't as tuned into, because you can, as an independent filmmaker, you kind of have to do it all, right? And so, but yeah, if you've got a skill set that God has given you that isn't writing or directing, that's okay. Like, you can still be involved in film, and still be a filmmaker, and not don't think of yourself as any less if you're not like, oh, I have to be. That's why I love getting to know guys. It's a little bit easier to do that on the technical side, right? Where somebody goes, well, I'm just good at camera, and so I just operate the camera. It's like, dude, that's awesome. Like, you don't have to be a DP. You can just be a camera operator and change the lenses out. And you're so valuable,
Yeah. Yeah.
So everybody's valuable. Every role is valuable. So, play around with that. Get to know what those roles are. Play around with it. Find the place where you are. And if it happens to be writing, that's awesome. And go after that. If it happens to be directing, I just meet a lot of people in the film industry, and I give you that advice because I have this conversation a lot, where it kind of feels like they're writing and directing only because they feel like that's what they have to do to try to get into the film industry, right? I have to write something. That's the biggest one. I have to write something, and then I have to go make it. Well, not necessarily. Like, find a friend who writes, who might be a better writer than you, and make their thing. Like, it doesn't have to be your name on it. Especially, if you're just eager to make something. So that's where the networking comes in, incredibly valuable, just getting to know other people in the industry. So
Yeah, definitely. So
that might have been like 5 or 6 or 7 pieces of advice, but
perfect anyways. So if you're able and willing to share it, what is next after DotConner? What's the next big thing you're going to do?
Yeah, I don't know. as any, there's other things I'm working on that are not just DotConner. That's just the nature of being independent. So I have a documentary travel series that I'm working on, as a producer. And, so that'll be, that's potentially a top tier, platform show. Different production company that's working on that. It's not original. And so that'll probably be big in the sense of, if it lands where we want it to land, it could be big. But yeah, I kind of got my eye on that. Like, what's the next narrative thing that I want to do? And to be honest with you, DotConner is interesting because I do get the sense that it has potential to really be a game changer. And I imagine that if it is, that then I probably have to consider what I'm doing next with that brand. So I don't have. There's no DotConner 2 movie in the works right now, because what we're trying to do is really put all our eggs in this basket and get the movie. If it's the only thing we do, just make the biggest splash we absolutely can with that. And then from there, we'll see what we do. But, it's funny. Another thing that happens with the industry is you sort of get labeled as this is another thing I want to break. Immediately, if DotConner is a huge success, we'll be labeled as the live action kids people. And that's all that anybody will be like, oh, well, that's what you do. You do live action kid stuff. I have a dystopian thriller script that I have a second draft on, but I'm going to make some changes on it, make a third draft, but I think it's pretty solid. I think it'd be a really good, fun film to do. That's a little bit, it's kind of tackles a little bit of, the idea of like losing free speech, in a country. And I think that's kind of but it's a very like sort of, brutal thriller. And so it'd be kind of funny to start to do something like that. Follow up the kids movie or something like that.
Yeah. They're like, wait, whoa, where did that, what happened here?
Yeah. Cause what we want to do is we want to go, man, we just love the idea of getting back to what Hollywood's kind of stopped doing, which is giving people like just fun, entertaining movies that like, are well made and have Christian worldview behind it. The other thing I would say, since the lore guys, is I love their platform and I want to come up with something. I've got a little idea for a sort of a Hitchcockian psychological thriller that would be low enough budget for me to make, that wouldn't totally make sense on their platform. And so I'm kind of like debating, do I do that, as sort of a way to kind of support them, but then also, show that, because again, my whole thing is, and this is why I align so great with them, is I just want to break the industry or break the general convention of what it means to be a filmmaker and go, no, man. And there's people doing some awesome stuff on that platform too. So, doing the exact same thing. So yeah, we'll see what it has in store. Hopefully 2025 is the year of DotConner, Webtective. And by the end of it, everybody knows what it is. So
yeah. No, yeah, definitely. So where can people find out more about you and DotConner? And you said, you're still finishing up funding. So where can people find out more about that?
Yeah. Well, for the show, DotConner.com has a link to the funding campaign, which is run through a site called WeFunder. The series, all the places the series is streaming can be found there. Information about the cast and crew can be found there. Our company is Huff Media Productions, and the website is huffmediapro.com. It's Huff Media Pro everywhere in terms of Instagram, Facebook, and then it's Webtective everywhere in terms of Facebook, Instagram, all that, for the show. So those are the primary places. I will say, as kind of a quick little tease, and the website will have all this information, or socials will have all this information. We're about to launch a DotConner Webtective app, which has the original series on it, but it's gamified, where kids can watch the series but unlock bonus content and behind the scenes stuff and all sorts of things, and then even get a sneak peek of the movie by finishing all the challenges within the app. And we're working with an awesome company here out of Tennessee that does mobile gaming, and a lot of other stuff too. They're helping on the movie as well. But that's the first of hopefully, more DotConner game apps, because the series itself and the movie is very much driven towards this sort of like interactive gaming kind of idea. So we're super excited about that. We got our first one coming out. It's going to be free, but it's a good way for parents to engage with the show, for their kids to engage with the show through the app, because the episodes will all be contained within the app. You won't need Wi-Fi to be able to watch, and it doesn't spit it. Exactly to your point about Disney Plus, it doesn't spit the kids out to something they shouldn't see.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of it. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, all those links will be in the description below this episode. Once again, thank you so much for joining me today on Creator Corner.
Thanks for having me.